Hello, this is Sharif and Credit Assurance Engineer Fellow, and my mentor is Joseph Kawesi. Today we're going to look at debugging skills. We're going to look at debugging Java techniques. One, we're going to look into StepOver. Two, we're going to look into StepInto. And three, we're going to look at StepReturn and other buttons like terminate, resume, and when you're trying to debug. Ideally, debugging, sorry, we are trying to understand the code workflow, the understanding of the code workflow, and then we see what does the code do. We are trying to understand the code line per line or the method references. So in this session, we're going to be looking into three ideal buttons that are being supported by Eclipse IDE, and then we're going to see how they are of importance on a day-to-day, daily life, and when you're trying to learn through different like projects. For this time, we're going to be debugging our normal Selenium code, which is in Reference Application Distro, and I hope some of us are familiar with it. But ideally, we're understanding the workflow of the code workflow. I'm going to hit a debug, my debug point on line 64. So I'm trying to say that run the entire system, run the entire test, and then wait for me on line 64. That's what when you hit a breakpoint, you're trying to tell the system or the automation or your test that you run this test, but when you reach on line 64, pause for me, wait for me there. So with that, I'm going to run this in debug mode. I already added my debug point. My tests are running. I already have my server running. I'm running a Docker Compose file. So it is advisable to always have the local instance running, because sometimes the KA, the demo, they are a little bit slow. There's a lot of traffic that is taking place on them. So let me run this in debug mode. I can right click on the project, debug as, join test, or you can just directly come and hit on this debug button. Then we need to wait until a debug point is being hit. That's when these buttons can be active. The step over, step into, and step return. For this time, they're not active, so we need to wait until the debug point is being hit for them to be active. The same approach is the way how we are using, the way we're using when you're writing, when you're trying to debug the normal raw Java. So this is the same idea. We can see that the debug point is being hit on line 64. And then you can also tell that it is already hit on line 64 here, as you can see. Then what you're going to first deal with, StepInto and StepOver. Then we look into the StepInto and step return. We can see that they already have other options. You can hit F6 on your keyboard, F5, and F7 for step return. So what we are going to first take through is that we're going to first see what does the step over does. Ideally, suppose we have our automation is running, we've run our tests that is running in the background, and we already have the debug point is being hit on line 64. So what the step in over does, it executes line per line, but starting from where you've located your debug point. So we already saw that it is on line 64, and it is pausing us, it is waiting for us. So when you come back to your automation, it's not needed. When you come back to your automation here, it is pausing here on the home page. So it is waiting for us to do some actions. So when I step over, I'm only telling this line that I'm going to take the debugger, the JVM, Java Virtual Machine, execute this line 64 and goes to the next line. So what step over does, you are stepping over line 64, but telling the JVM to execute that specific line. So when I'll step over again, step over for once, then I wait for to see what happens. As we're waiting for the virtual machine to run, we can as well tell what is taking place in the background. We can see that um, it has logged in as a nurse, as we can see, and then there are apps that are present here on our page, on our home page. So that means line 64 is being executed, and then it is waiting for us on line 65. So you are trying to understand what does the line do. This is where it comes of importance that you understanding what does this code or what do these lines do in the background or while you're running your tests. So that's the idea importance of step over. It executes line per line, line per line, line per line, waiting for you to maybe understand or to do something on these methods, or maybe you want to do some improvements on the line of code. So this is where it is of importance, like it runs line per line. I can also continue to step over, step over again. So like as you can see, it runs line per line. But like I said, if I'm on line 67 and I step over, that means line 67 is the one that is being executed, and it is waiting for you to execute line 68 by stepping over again. So that's it. That's what the step over again. Step over is the same, has the similarity of using print line statements. For this time, I didn't want to talk about print line statements, but they are also of importance, because when we add a print line statement here, system.out.println, and then we add some messages, maybe debugging using Eclipse IDE. So ideally, when I add a print line statement, it is the same idea when I'm using step over. So like if I add a print line statement on line 68, here on line 68, and then suppose my breakpoint was on line 67. So when I execute line 67 and the print line statement is being run, and then I execute it again, I step over again, and it is running. So ideally, that means line 67 is the one that it is running perfect. So whether it is running perfect or whether it is having some issues, print line statements also help us to understand which line is running or which line is failing, which is the same idea where we are understanding when we are using stepping over. I need to remove this. Okay. Okay. I'm going to pause a bit, then we explain about stepping into. Then I run again. I debug again. This time around I can use this, and I need to get rid of that. Then we need to wait until the breakpoint is being hit. Our breakpoint is being hit on line 64. So we can talk about stepping into. So when you're stepping into, we are trying to understand what does these method references are. Line 64 comprises two method references. Method references, ideally, these are just methods that have been called, or they comprises of other methods somewhere. So stepping into will look through each method reference on that particular line. As simple as that. So this is a method reference because it comprises of other method somehow, somewhere. We've called it from. So it's like you are calling a method from somewhere. So that one becomes a method references from within the class you're calling it from. So this is a method reference. Go to login page. Login as a nonce is also a method reference. So when we step into, it is first going to take us through each method reference per method reference. So like I'm going to step into, then we see what happens. But before, we can, when you put a cursor on the method reference, this, you can see it comes from login page, your test framework, then testbase.login. So it was written in testbase class dot got login. So we are calling it from testbase class. Yeah. Login as a nonce, it comes from your test framework login page as nonce. So it's on login page class. This one is on login testbase class. So I'm going to step into once. So when I step into, it took me into a class called test-based class. Why? Because it is where this method have been written and we are calling it from test-based class. You can as well tell this got login page method is being used here, created here, and you are calling this method from this test-based class and you're using it somewhere. This is the same idea when we are when you're actually calling methods. But maybe I can talk about the Openmrs core. You are calling using context or something. So this is the same idea that we are using. It may not be the same idea, but at least it has some clues of calling methods. Okay, so this is got login page. It have our breakpoint is being hit again, paused on line 235. I just wanted to explain a little bit of this method, what it does. So this gets to login page and have a response. It it throws an exception when status is greater than or equal to 400. And then that one also status less than 599. It comes back to login page. So there's this method, and it waits for the method login wait for the method after refreshing, then returns the login. So this becomes a method. So like as we know that a method is a block of code, comprises of a method reference. So when you want to call this method, we're only using the method name got login as a page. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to step over, like we've shown that stepping over is just running line per line until we come out of this method, and then we see what happens if we come out of this method when we had stepped into. I'm going to step over once. And then like we saw, it runs, the automation is going to be executing line per line. So I'm going to step over until I come out of this method, and then I wait until and see what happens. So when I stepped in over for when I was in test-based class, it took me back to line 64. Why? Because there is another method reference that is on the same line 64. So for the stepping into, it will only execute or look through line method references per method reference. A method reference, like I said, it's that method that is it's that line, it's that method reference that has been called but comprises of other methods somewhere that we've seen, like how we've seen. We still have another method reference and we need to look through. So we can step into again. So if we stepped into, it took us to lines 106. And again, we can also tell as well when we're seeing here. And we are in login page. So we can step over and we come back to our normal line, which is line 64 in the login page, login test. So when I step over again, it is going to act as step over. Let's here there's another trick. When I step over again right now, so stepping over is acting as stepping into, is acting as a step over. Remember, step over only executes line per line. But when we are stepping into here before, and we look through each method reference on this line, we first look through go to login page, and then also look through login as nurse. But after executing that line and there is no any other method reference, and we are stepping over again. So stepping over for this time, stepping into for this time, is being executed as step over. So we can use stepping into as in the reference to step over. We can see that again, it only runs that line per line. So I can step over, then I come out of that method, then I come back to line 60 because it is being executed as if this method is run. So we like okay, just a second, like when we are on line 23, so this method, when we stepped over, so this method ran as if the whole method name is being run. So when I stepped over and I stepped over again, so it ran this method initiate as a home page, which is here, and then it took me to the next line. So that's the good thing with stepping over and stepping into. So I'm going to pause this and then I run this test again. We look through step return and other buttons. You can wait until the breakpoint is being hit on line 64. Then we look through step return. Okay, so when step return, ideally it have a relationship with step into. So before we step return, we are going to first hit step into. we first go to login page. As we can see, we stepped into the first method reference on login test, and we are on the login. We are on 235. So if I step into again. So assuming I'm on lines 242, and I want to go back where I started from, so that you use step return. So step return take you back to where you started from, where the breakpoint was coming from before you reach on in this class. So if I step return, it puts me back to where I started from. So that's what step return does. What it does, it only executes those lines that you've looked through that you stepped into, and then it returns you back to where you started from. So that's what it does. These approaches are being used when you are trying to understand the code workflow and what does the code do. And while we are doing this, we are supposed to see what is our test instance doing. As we can see, if I step into and I execute that line 64, and it is hit on line 65, when you come back to the home page, you can see we are on the home page, logged in as a nurse, and then there are apps that are being present here. And then you, like when you're trying to debug, you can as well tell whether the assert truths are true or false. So that's it. I'm very sure this is going to be of importance to some of us. Thanks to Joseph, who has been mentoring me in this time of debugging techniques. Then terminate will stop the executions, will stop the entire process. Resume will rerun the code, or we run the server, the Java virtual machine. So I'm going to terminate this program, and the instance is being stopped, and I'm going to terminate that. So thank you, and I'm very sure this is going to be helpful to us when you're debugging. This is the same approach that we're using when you are debugging the raw Java, running debugging in Java mode. Thank you and have a nice day.